Today's show is brought to you by Boat Pattaya of Boat Avenue and Shambhala, Phuket. For more information on their properties, see the link in the description below. Good morning, Thailand. It's Wednesday, the 25th of August, and plenty to talk about on the program. And once again, because our set has got a big blank area in the middle, we brought Mike to fill up that spot here for another talking point. Welcome back.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, everyone.
And glad to see you've dressed up today.
Indeed, I try.
Okay, so our talking point today is going to be about the Sandbox. And the reason we're talking about this is because Mike's parents have come all the way from the UK to spend a couple of weeks in the Sandbox. So we're going to get some sort of real in-depth perspective of what they think about the success of the Sandbox, and that's coming up. But for now, let's start with Jay and look at today's COVID case numbers.
Sure, Tim. Today in Thailand, we have 18,417 new COVID infections, and 146 of those infections are within prisons. 297 COVID-related deaths, and currently we have 21,186 patients who have been fully recovered and discharged from hospitals, and 189,268 patients still currently in care.
Okay, so that's all the numbers. We got quite a few people asking us over recent days why we report the prison numbers. The reason being is that there's such high proportion in relation to the number of prisoners in Thailand. So yeah, that's why we report the prison numbers, and we're glad to say that the numbers are slowly coming down, but at some stage we'll stop reporting those, as we'll stop reporting the COVID numbers at some stage as well. But when we do, people say we want you to report the COVID numbers. So we're between the devil and the deep blue sea. Right, Mike, let's go to you. And your parents decided to come to the Sandbox.
Yeah, so my parents arrived about 4 days ago now, and they came through London. I think there was a lot of fear amongst them from joining the Sandbox scheme, from what they've seen not just on the Thaiger but other news media programs, and I think their experience has been very, very, very different. And I feel like I want to go on and voice how good their experience has been, because I think this is positive news, and I want to share this with the audience.
Right, let's talk about the process of them sort of deciding to come to Phuket to visit you, and also the paperwork. So can we sort of start with how it all came about?
Yeah, well, I think because of what's gone on with the global pandemic, people are not seeing each other in years, and they obviously want to come and see me. I'm not going to go back to the UK anytime soon, and Phuket's an amazing place. They've been here multiple times, and they wanted to come back, so they made the applications. Through the process, I think that was a bit tedious. They said there was a few bits of paperwork to do, but I don't think anything too crazy.
Did they think it was onerous? In other words, it was too much paperwork, or they just thought, no, we'll just knuckle down. There's nothing we can't find here. We'll do it.
So I think they said the actual process was relatively smooth. I think the biggest issue was that in today's digital age, you would usually put stuff on your phone. When turning up at the actual airport itself, they wanted everything printed out,
right.
Thai Airways, and I think that became a bit difficult. In the airport, they were scrambling around looking for a printer. But I think at the end of it, they said that it all kind of made sense. There was a bit too much documentation I had to provide. But when we're looking at the return leg back to the UK, I mean, there's also things that the UK need, which is also, it might be over the top in relation to what they're asking for. So I think the way Thailand's operating isn't that far different from other countries. I think the criticism on all the documentation is basically too much. I think it's a fair process that they're following.
Mike, did they receive any help from the embassies? Because a lot of the people, the initial sandboxes, were complaining that they wouldn't get any information on the COEs. They wouldn't, when they sent a message, they wouldn't get any replies. So did they run in any trouble regarding this?
So they didn't. I think obviously the sandbox has been open for a while.
Since July the 1st.
Yeah. So I think for the people arriving initially, they were probably sandboxing the sandbox effectively and testing the sandbox. And maybe the rules wasn't that clear. I think the guidance that they had from the website was very clear. This is what they're required. They need to take this test. They need to provide these documents. They need to provide proof of an SHA registered hotel, and that was what required. So they actually found the process relatively smooth.
But if you want to go to the US or if you want to go to Europe, you don't need the double vaccinations. You need a PCR test, but there's a much lower threshold to be able to get in. I think a lot of people complaining about the Sandbox process have said the bar is set very high, and then once you're here, the 4 PCR checks, the fact that you've got to prepay those, the fact that you have the threat of being dragged off to an ASQ hotel if other people in your group or from your plane test positive, etc., was a bit onerous.
Yeah, and they were definitely concerned about this. I think the whole conversation around if you're sat next to someone with COVID and on the plane, you could be dragged off to an ASQ hotel. But I think now looking at the numbers, and we had the numbers of people that have been dragged off to an ASQ.
We say dragged off; they're not like physically handcuffed, but they're asked to go to an ASQ hotel.
But I think they're around 100 people out of the 15,000 that have arrived. So the chances that this is going to happen is extremely low. And I think that was the point of concern. I've asked other members of families to come out, and this has been the point of concern around if they have COVID. But if you just look purely at the numbers, you're talking, well under 1% of people that this has happened to. And I'm here to say that, once they're within the country, their experience has been pretty amazing,
Well, let's get to that. But for now, have a quick break on Good Morning Thailand. We're going to come back with all the main news stories from around Thailand. Then back with Mike and Jay with more of the Sandbox experience. Well, starting off today, warning that the news today is mostly bad this morning. The Thai PM Prayut Chan-o-cha has ordered a full investigation into the alleged killing of a drug suspect by Nakhon Sawan policemen. In leaked video of the incident, a leading police officer can be seen suffocating the drug suspect with a plastic bag during an alleged attempt to extort 2 million baht out of him. Before sending the man's dead body to the hospital, the senior police instructed the other police to make sure the man's cause of death was listed as a drug overdose. The PM has ordered the National Police Chief to launch the fact-finding probe into the incident, and Police Colonel Titisan Uttanapon, the superintendent of the main city police station in Nakhon Sawan. The dead man's lawyer says that he obtained the clip from a junior police officer who sought his help in forwarding the clip to the National Police Chief. The junior officer asked the lawyer to follow up on the case before he and his fellow officers were also killed. An 80-year-old Australian man was assaulted after he smacked a car that almost ran him over. So the driver of the car got out of his vehicle and kicked the octogenarian in the back. Dashcam footage captured the incident that happened in Chiang Mai, the northern city hoping to launch a tourist initiative called Charming Chiang Mai in October. An unidentified security guard who was at the scene says he saw the older Australian man hit the car's bonnet after nearly being run over. The man was walking through a zebra crossing prior to the road rage incident. The kick was so powerful the older man crashed to the ground, knocking over several bikes in the process. Channel 7 News says the attacker later contacted the elderly man, apologised, paid his hospital bills. The older man decided not to press charges. A missing 4-year-old boy's body has been found in a Bangkok well used to mix cement. The boy had been missing since last week, and his mother had previously told the Mirror Foundation, a humanitarian organisation, that her son had vanished while she was washing dishes. Police deployed 4 sniffer dogs to help find the boy. The dogs then led officials to the cement well where the boy's body was found. The well is 6 metres deep and was being used to mix cement that remained from a construction site. And Pattaya is facing a new problem. Besides its growing number of COVID cases, the city by the Gulf of Thailand is amassing a vast amount of infectious waste, which has increased the garbage disposal problem the city is encountering. The Deputy Mayor, who also oversees the city's Environment Office, says that prior to COVID pandemic, Pattaya dealt with about 800 kilograms of infectious waste every day. Now the city has 7 to 8 tonnes of infectious waste per day. The increased waste comes from hospitals, hospitals and the community isolation centres. In fact, there's so much waste in Pattaya that the company that holds the contract for garbage collection is unable to handle the surplus of waste material. To fix the issue, the council has told the company to put more trucks on the street. Problem solved. And the Public Health Ministry is seeking approval from the CCSA to allow restaurants to reopen to fully vaccinated diners as new infection trends continue to decline. He made the remarks after the Public Health Minister met with representatives from 9 clusters of businesses that were ordered to close as infections across 29 provinces started to climb last month. The ministry will ask the CCSA to consider allowing restaurants to offer dine-in services with certain restrictions, including maximum capacities, outdoor dining options, and checking staff and diner vaccinations. And we'll be back with more Good Morning Thailand and our discussion today about the success of the Sandbox right after this. Thanks for joining us on today's Good Morning Thailand. It's the middle of the week and Mike is still here with a talking point each day. And today we're talking about the Sandbox. We had a bit of a talk earlier about the process in getting here for your parents. What sort of age group are they generally?
Late 60s.
Okay, late 60s. And now they're here. So you've been going out each night, not so much from your eyes, but what has been their impression?
Okay, so I think, they thought they were turning up to devastation, is what, is portrayed, because we all see the images of Patong and Kata and Karon and all these areas are shut. So they've turned up, they've gone to, Shengtalay, Layan area. They're staying at a very nice hotel. Shout out to the Pavilion. They've treated my parents very, very well there.
So let's be straight.
Yeah.
They're privileged. They've got some dollars or pounds, and they're staying in a very nice hotel, and they're mixing around the Chungtalay Layan area, which is or has been all the way through quite open compared to some of the other tourist areas.
Yeah, and this is the point. I think that for a lot of Europeans and the West, people have been at home. They haven't had holidays. They have. For people who have saved money, they haven't spent in 2 years. So, they might have, shelled out slightly more than they would have done normally. But once they've arrived in this area, it's been fantastic for them. They've absolutely loved it. And there's multiple reasons down to this, which I can go into.
Okay.
I guess that has been one of the criticisms of the Phuket Sandbox as well, that it's only meant for people who can actually afford these luxuries, because at the end of the day it does cost a lot of money. And the beauty of Phuket generally was, and coming to Thailand, is that it's so affordable, but it's just not anymore, and that's why we have such a low volume of people coming in. So, and maybe that's why a lot of the people say that Phuket Sandbox is a fail, because we have such a low number of people coming in, because most of them can't afford to come here.
But I disagree, sorry, because I'm looking at the ASQ hotels, and yes, my parents are staying in what is a nice 5-star hotel, but I have other friends that have come and stayed in a 700 baht a night hotel. Now,
Whoa. You find me a 700 baht SHA hotel in Phuket. I don't think they exist.
Do you know what? During this, we're going to overlay and go onto Agoda, and I'm going to show the audience.
No use going through Agoda, because you can't book through Agoda. You can't book through hotels.com or booking.com. You have to book through an SHA approved website.
So that's incorrect. My parents booked through booking.com and booked an SHA hotel.
That is amazing.
Yeah. And you can book through Agoda and you can book through booking.com. It says SHA on there and it does it all for you.
Yeah, I'm aware that those websites have they show the logo, the SHA logo. There was the TAT at one stage who said, no, you cannot book through those websites. Clearly, I suppose they were trying to direct traffic through their nominated websites, but that surprises me, because that is a change to the situation.
And it's not just my parents, my other friends that have arrived, they've all booked on Agoda or booking.com. So what they've done, they've gone to booking.com, they get all the documents from the hotel, which sends them post, and they provide it to, part of their COE certification, and then they get in. So There's some great prices out there on the internet. Yeah, and they're cheap. You'll be shocked. If you go onto Agoda, all the prices are there. And the smaller hotels are doing SHA as well now. So, there's ones around here in Chantilly, which you can go and stay in for relatively cheap.
Yeah, I think we always said that the prices, there was no perceived price gouging, and that the hotel prices were very reasonable. But I never saw anything 700 baht a night, and if there is, that's great. So, which areas have they sort of been going to? Principally around here, or they've been touring around the island?
So initially it was the Chantilly Layan area. I mean, we've ventured into Phuket town just recently. But what we're finding out is from their perspective, number one, because there's not that many people here, there's not many tourists, it's pretty amazing. I mean, Phuket is at its probably best I've ever seen it.
Yeah, the roads are clear, people are really trying to make people welcome, the beaches are clear. It's a really great place to visit if you can get through the paperwork.
Yeah, so the service is insane. So we saw this, pre-pandemic, and the service was lacking because there were so many people here. There was a sense of staff becoming complacent and rude, in some aspects, but the hospitality that has been shown to my parents is what Thailand is famous for, and it's been pretty amazing. They can't believe how welcome they are here, and it's been quite warming and humbling for them to come and enjoy this experience. And then beyond this, the hotels are they're reopening. Some amazing, beautiful hotels here, and the restaurants, they're open. So when we talk about, there's nothing to do in Phuket, which I've heard a few times just from different people, I mean, you can come and stand in a nice hotel, whether it's a luxury one or a non-luxury one. You can eat at some amazing restaurants. There's lots of choices here. You can go to the beaches. The beaches are definitely not shut. All the beaches are...
Beaches are open.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing you can't do is go to bars. I mean, that right now, as today stands, but... You can have a drink in a restaurant. I mean, everyone's saying you can't, but we've experienced it. You can go to restaurants. They're all serving alcohol, like whether they should be or shouldn't be. This is the reality of the situation. I'm not going to hide away from it, and it's been a very, very good experience so far for them.
Jay,
I agree and disagree, but I mean, what I mean is that I feel like there's a big contrast between what people come to Phuket for. I agree, there's a lot of beauty in Phuket, the beaches, and there's a lot of things to do. But I mean, me as a local here, I kind of feel sad when I see everything is quiet. I'm not really used to this. I think of Phuket as a lively place for parties, for hanging out, crowds everywhere in Phuket town. But you're right, you can't really see those people. And to me, it feels like, oh my God, Phuket's empty, Phuket's dying. But I guess, other people can find beauty in it. And I agree with that, that it's great for those kind of people. But I think a lot of the viewers would agree as well that Phuket is known as, having a vibrant scene. Whether you go into Phuket town for shopping, whether you go to Patong, Karan, Kata for partying, for the restaurant scene. And that's why a lot of the people are like, it's not Phuket anymore. It's dead and it's dying because, yes, you can go to a restaurant and have maybe, a couple of drinks, but it's not like a lot of the people come here for that vibrant party scene, for that, the craziness of what Phuket has to offer as well as the beauty.
I think that's because of your age range, though. So
that too, yes.
It's definitely segmented. I mean, the majority of our viewers are, post 40 years old, and I think that the reality is,
the fact is that still probably 90% of Phuket shops and businesses are still closed, but there's 10% that are open, and they're the brave ones who have been enticed here by the sell-up job by the TAT, saying that everything is going to be returning to normal. Statistically, we know that the Sandbox numbers, there's some 15,000 people that are still on the island from the Sandbox arrivals. About half of those people could be considered tourists, people like your parents. But a lot of people have come back to avoid Bangkok ASQ, using the Sandbox here as their quarantine. And that the numbers are infinitesimally small compared to the 1 million tourists that used to arrive every single month. So you're going to come back, I know, and sort of encourage people to come back, which we'll do in just a moment. But we still need to realise that the people that are coming here are a tiny proportion, and the situation at the moment is still completely unsustainable. So let's come back and have a talk about how we can encourage people to come to the Sandbox. We're going to have our regional headlines, then back with more Good Morning Thailand with Mike and Jay.
Indonesia is poised to produce 2 types of COVID vaccines next year to meet domestic requirements. An mRNA vaccine, collaborating with pharmaceutical companies in China, and another described as the red and white vaccine. Japan plans to expand its COVID state of emergency, covering Tokyo and 12 other areas, to 8 more prefectures as it looks to quell the coronavirus. 70% of Japan's 47 prefectures now have restrictions. Copenhagen has been named the world's safest city, beating former winners like Tokyo, Singapore, and Osaka in the 4th edition of the Economist Intelligence Unit's Biennial Safe Cities Index. Singapore has reported 111 new locally transmitted COVID-19 infections yesterday, a 4-fold jump in case numbers compared to last week's averages. 76-year-old Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has agreed to be the ruling party's candidate for vice president in next year's elections, according to the PDP Laban party, who are expected to endorse Senator Christopher Bong Go as the country's presidential candidate in next year's election.
You're watching Good Morning Thailand on the Thaiger. Please subscribe to the channel. There's a link under here. Thanks, Mike. And we've got Mike and we've got Jay with us here on our panel. We're talking about Sandbox. And I suppose let's put this into perspective with it's not just Phuket that's been experimenting with the Sandbox. There's Samui Plus, there's Chiang Mai, which is looking to reopen in October. Pattaya is very eager to open with a Sandbox. I suppose the problem with some of these landlocked places is how do they open and sort of preserve all the roads that lead into those? It's easy on an island, but anyway, that's for people who are much higher up on our pay grade to decide that. So how do we get more people to come to these sandboxes, not just Phuket, but all these other ones as well? I mean, we know in Phuket at the moment, there's a lot of people who are destitute. They have been waylaid. A lot of the people that used to work here have left the island. Some 100,000 people has been documented. But there's another 30 or 40,000 people who are here without jobs. They've got nowhere to go. And there's been good people like One Phuket, people like Sean Stenning and 5 Star Marine, who have been putting together programs for more than a year to go and keep these people fed. That's not sustainable either.
Yeah, I mean, if I just go and start from the beginning, I mean, we've all got to start forgetting what was before and just focus on now. Phuket and Thailand were totally locked. 0 international tourists coming in, okay? So we're starting from 0. So we have to move forward. If we just say we're starting from 0, we have to move forward, the Sandbox scheme makes total sense. Let's trial this out of bringing tourists back in small numbers. Stop talking about, there was millions of people coming before and this is, we have to start somewhere, start bringing some tourists back, provide them with a great experience, as good as we can do, without restrictions. And there are very limited restrictions here in relation to what exists outside of Thailand, and bring people back. Now, this is the way to get the market to recover. All the naysayers out there, which are, commenting around, I would never go Thailand, you're not helping the situation, right? If you really want people to have jobs and, and work, we need to start bringing and encouraging tourism to come back when it's time. It's an amazing place and an amazing experience. The best thing we can do is give these people jobs. And the way we give them jobs is by encouraging tourism. So we've got to ask ourselves as, as responsible individuals and a media outlet, what message are we trying to perceive? Do you want us to show, we know that these areas are dead, like Patong and Kata. We can't change this is done. Now what we've got to do is focus purely on the recovery and show everyone the amazing time you can have while joining the Sandbox scheme.
What about how do you cope with the fact that there's a pandemic happening around the world? I mean, the Thai government are obviously wrestling with this. They want to reopen the country, but they also want to reopen it in a safe way, hence all the paperwork and the restrictions. I mean, which way do you go?
Yeah, I think what they're going to do is, when you have a process, which is what we have at the moment in the Sandbox, you then look at making the process more efficient. Once the process becomes more efficient, people will be able to travel easier to Thailand. And I think this is what's going to happen. As we spoke about before with the whole COE, at the start, it was very, very confusing. Now, from my family's experience, it was much more structured. You fast forward a month, it's going to be even more structured. When they turned up at the airport, in terms of Phuket, they were quickly, given their COVID test and escorted to the hotel. 2 hours later, they had the results back, totally fine, allowed to leave. There was no horror story here in this sense. And I think as time progresses, this will become much more efficient.
But I think, Mike, you make a great point of being efficient, but I think efficiency is a key point and a problem. It seems like regarding the Sandbox and regarding the officials making the decisions, because as soon as things start to get better, they go forward way too much, and then things go bad, and then they keep on adding restrictions and restrictions. There seems to be no balance or no proper guideline as to what needs to be done. So let's, since we're starting from zero,
yeah.
And the Sandbox, I think, is a good idea. I think it's a great idea. The execution of it could have been better. So what would we change now? So we have all these cases in Bangkok, mostly around areas around Bangkok. Phuket does have a high number of cases, but the people coming in from the Sandbox, the cases are relatively less. So what would be more efficient, you think?
Okay, so number one, I think we should start focusing on cases, because I think it's become borderline irrelevant, and focus on number of people actually getting sick from this thing, because you can have millions of cases and no one getting sick. I'm not saying that is the case. So number one, we should stop talking about cases and start talking about people being sick or hospitalized, to change the rhetoric to move this forward. And number two, we need to have more openings of different venues, right, to facilitate new tourists coming in.
Well, okay, so who's going to pay for those venues to open? So you've got the chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
Do the venues open to encourage the tourists, or do the tourists come here first and say, oh, okay, we need to open more venues?
Well, let's be honest, there's virtually no government support, right? Everyone we speak
That's
to
right.
out there, whether they're, hoteliers or working in restaurants or business owners or just bar staff, the support from the government has been almost zero. They haven't received any money. There's no furlough scheme here like there is in Western countries. They're by themselves here. They're left to defend by themselves. And there is charitable organisations that provide them with food, but that's not enough, right? We really need to somehow get this market open and encourage tourism. And the only way for this to happen is to create the demand, and then the supply will follow. Right? It's just purely business economics.
Well, assumedly, the demand for tourism in Thailand exists. People are keen to come back at some stage. It's just from their economic circumstances, the number of flights, the paperwork. I mean, there are barriers in the way of just automatically opening everything up.
Yeah, I mean, but the paperwork is nothing. For anyone who can't fill out a few papers, I mean,
But it's not just the barriers of getting here, it's the barriers of getting out of their own country, looking at getting back into their country at the moment, and also the fact that they may not have a job at the moment because of the recessions in many of the countries which used to feed tourism into Thailand.
Sure, and for these people, we don't advise you be taking holidays, you don't have jobs, but for the people who are looking for holiday and looking for options and thinking, is Thailand a good option? I mean, a lot of the viewers here, you must love Thailand, otherwise why are you watching the show and why are you watching Thailand-based content? If you love Thailand, come back. It's an amazing place, it's open, you're going to have a great time here. That's pretty much, the reality of the situation. Yes, you can't go to nightclubs, so what? You can do everything else here. And I think that has to be said. You can have an amazing...
Mike, there's always OnlyFans.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah, true.
Okay, so we'll come back. We'll go to have a look at the weather around Thailand today, then come back with Jay and Mike and wrap up the subject. Thank you for watching Good Morning Thailand. Generally clear skies around the capital, 31 today, down to 30 for the next few days, down to only 25 overnight, so fairly muggy up there. To the Sandbox, and temperatures of 28 over the forecast period, down to 25 to 27 overnight. You're going to have a little bit of rain, but plenty of sunshine and some cloud around as well. Gee, it rained a lot yesterday. Up to the northeast of Thailand, and 32, 30 and 27 throughout the forecast period, dropping down in temperature by the end of the week, down to 22 at night, but moderate quality skies there, a reading of 61. To Chiang Mai in the north of Thailand, temperature of 31 today, down to 29 by the end of the week. Temperatures get a little bit cooler overnight up there, down to 22. It's probably not very cool for a lot of people around the world. Clear skies up north to the central Gulf Coast and a temperature of 32 today, then 28 and 30 for Thursday and Friday. Temperatures down to the 25s and 26s. Very clear skies around the central Gulf Coast. And to Pattaya and Chonburi, we've got temperatures of 29 today, but 26 and 25 to the end of the week. Temperatures down to 25 overnight. See, on Friday, you've only got 1 degree difference between the low and the high. And good clear skies over Pattaya and Chonburi. Well, if you're still with us on Good Morning Thailand, thanks for hanging on to the end. Been a lot of news today, and we've been talking mostly about the Sandbox, the potential sandboxes opening up in other parts of Thailand. Whose dog's that?
I think that's...
We've got another dog. Yay! Where's Charlie today?
Oh, he's at home. He's had his moment of shine.
Yes.
He's taking it easy.
So what's the take-home message from your parents? What would they like to say to people who are wanting to know more about if the Sandbox is worth coming to?
I think their message would be, after speaking to them last night in detail about this, is that they can't believe how amazing it is here. I mean, I can't believe how amazing it is here. I mean, besides the pandemic, and all the terrible parts of it, Phuket had huge mass tourism here, which kind of, destabilized the ecosystem, not just the economy, but also, the sustainability of the island. And there's been a full reset. It's now absolutely amazing. And I think this is the time to kick it off and bring back Phuket in a much better way. I think they would say, come and see what they've seen, and you'll really have an amazing time.
I'm wondering, Jay, whether the taxis and the tuk-tuks and all the scams and the things that people used to sort of write about Phuket, whether these people are going to sort of change their ways. I sort of doubt it. If you go to Patong and ask to get into a tuk-tuk, I think you're still going to be up for...
they're still pretty much acting the same, yeah. In fact, some people just get worse for some reason. They're just like, oh, I'll take what I can get. If I can just get one person pay me 1,000 baht for a 300 baht trip, they'll probably do it. Not everyone, but there's always a bad apple in the bunch.
Using the word reset, Mike, I think is interesting because I think we're all hoping that there may be some lessons learned from the days of mass tourism, and as we slowly reopen Phuket and the rest of Thailand, that there might be some little tweaks happening as sort of Thai tourism is dragged into the 21st century. Mike, thank you.
Welcome.
What are we talking about tomorrow?
Oh, we'll keep you all in suspense and surprise you all.
Mysterious Mike.
Okay. Jay, Mike, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The Thaiger, we've got our Thaiger Bites program. We've got our TNT hosted by Jet, who's still up in Chiang Mai. But we look forward to your comments, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.